I'm so happy to have on my very good friend and the second person ever that I interviewed on Coffee with Lynette, David DuByne. He is the creator of Adapt 2030 Climate Preparedness Channels and Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. The author of Climate Revolution, which is now being updated and edited for the second edition. But as a former coffee buyer in Myanmar, seeing cold weather damage to coffee trees firsthand, and the farm owners telling stories of how their great-grandfathers in the 1880s experienced the same conditions when coffee was being introduced as a cash crop. Freeze damaged top leaves, bean density changes, and 14% overplanting of new seedlings to compensate for cold losses sent him looking for answers, and he found cycles through history that affect food production. Understanding our sun-driven climate as we progress deeper into the new Eddy Grand Solar Minimum, weather extremes leading to global food scarcity changes, and how to survive and thrive during future challenging times with practical preparations. This is part one, and for part two, go to the Beyond Gold and Silver channel for more. Thank you for coming, David. I'm so happy to have you here today. Well, you were really instrumental in me doing indoor grow space, because I know how deeply you look at your work, and I believe you. And I know how deeply I look at my work, and so I also believe you from that end as well. But, it seems like the Russia-Ukraine war has been used as, almost a justification for the food drought that we're entering. Can you talk more about that? Because it's great to point fingers here and there, but can you really address that for us?
And at the same time, then after I do, Lynette, if you could jump in, because the economy
Absolutely.
and the food production or lack of farm inputs are running parallel right now. There's no denying it that
Yep.
These things are being constructed as whatever control mechanism, they're going in tandem with each other down the tracks here. So, when you and I, we talked, 2 months ago, when I was giving some forecasts here about when we rolled into this point right now at the end of May into the first week of June, that those who are watching economy news, business news, agricultural news would understand that, there's not enough seed, there wasn't enough herbicide, there's not enough fertilizer, and prices are going to rise exponentially. Now, those are generally the people who are already in business or, more well-to-do in the society. If you're going to stratify, if you're going to strata 100% all the way down, that top 20% is generally, they understand these cycles. They're more in-depth, in tune with these types of, business and economy and agriculture, et cetera, because it all does move together. And there's going to be some serious awareness arising. Once the numbers get crunched here coming up at the end of this month into June, they're going to know how much corn was planted or not. And then once you start to chase the daisy chain of corn usage, you're going to understand there's going to be a huge, huge bottleneck in production of so many things, from the ethanols to the animal feed, and then so many byproducts from corn that are used in almost everything that's in a box in a supermarket.
Yeah.
I mean, the amount of choices are just going to dry up so quickly. And, there has to be excuses for this as well. So, when I talked, I said the first check, there's going to be 3 points of time you're really going to look for as we move through the summer and into the harvest season. And this is our first marker in time here, is the awareness of the top 20% of the population with wealth in business that understand the farm inputs weren't there. And it's going to cause a huge, tidal wave of unrest in the cities coming into harvest time. So those now that have the means and the understanding are going to get ready. And they have way more money than the bottom part of the society. So when they go to buy and get ready and start prepping out, they're going to buy exponentially amounts of goods as well, because they can, and they are going to. And as we step into the middle of the summer, when they do the crop tours at the end of July and the 1st of August, The rest of the other, it'll take us to about 50% awareness, because at that point, it's going to step way beyond business news and press releases from the IMF and press releases from the World Bank and the Bank for International Settlements, which is ongoing now, which surprised me.
Right.
Since when we first talked, I said there's going to be some awareness across this kind of news feeds. And here we are, the BIS, the World Bank, and the IMF all released and all said there's going to be food shortages in less than 6 months, which is the exact time of October. That's the last data point. October, the whole world understands, and it falls apart at that point. The wheels literally come off. And if you didn't get ready, you're going to starve to death, or you are going to get stuck in a government facility trying to beg for help because your kids don't have food. And I'm serious when I say that. I really am. You are going to die if you don't get ready in this event here. That's the plan. The depopulation is going, and I'm not even saying this many high-level people and institutions can't all be rolling in the same thing. Like, we don't have enough of this. There's more fires here. We're bottlenecking here. The railroads aren't delivering here.
Right.
It's all institutions working together that are stopping the flow of everything right now, especially focused on food. And I'll stop before I go on a rant there.
Well, actually, I like your rant, so you can keep going on that rant. But I'm wondering if they've been using the shelf shortages. Like, somebody made a comment to me the other day, and I thought it was really interesting that this younger generation is now used to empty grocery store shelves, which I don't really think that's true, but that was their perception on it. What's your perception on it? Because we've had empty grocery store shelves since 2020. Then they haven't recouped, and it's going to get worse. I believe you, so I'm prepared. I've been prepping for a long time, and I'm grateful to you because all of the preparations that I'm doing up north is all covered so that we can control that.
Yeah, you can control what you have access to at your fingertips. Outside that control, there are levers and gears being shut down behind the scenes. You know, I'm very firm belief that these elitists have used some sort of algorithm or programs to game out what happens when you shut down a certain supply chain and what the knock-on effects is. And they've also gamed out human response and emotion to effects and stimuli. So if you have those two, all right, if we cut the fertilizer here, that'll cause a 20% decline here. And by the way, Brazil, another one, they just said that they're only going to be applying 75% of the average fertilizer application to their crops. And, you know, I'd done some research and talked to a lot of people. It's a 1-for-1. So anybody doing the math out there, it's a simple 1-to-1 with herbicide applications and fertilizer application. If you reduce 1% of your application on fertilizer, you reduce your yield 1%. So Brazil publicly coming out last week and saying, we are reducing fertilizer application 25%. They're a huge swing producer, huge. And they're going to be losing at least 25% of their crops. Because I'm not even talking about the herbicide applications in addition to the fertilizer shortages.
So let's take it down to like just a really personal level with this, because I put in ponds, and I am up north as well, putting in ponds to generate the fertilizer so that I'm not dependent upon manufactured fertilizer. And, you know, so therefore I can I think I can avoid that. But so is that what you recommend? Is that what you're doing for yourself? I mean, how are you preparing for yourself with this lack of fertilizer?
Well, since I have a registered farm, I've been able to buy several tons to sit by and put back in the storehouse there. At the same time, learning about producing natural fertilizers. Now, see, here's the thing. We're going to get bottlenecked and squeezed to the most duress and loss and upsetting of society for about a year period only. At that point, most people will work it out on how to get fertilizer inputs, how to grow the food. It's going to be this first year of unpreparedness for most people. But as next year and people have starved and they watch people die from hunger and turned away hungry families from their door that they may need to fight with later because those families know there's food inside, and my hungry children and my hungry wife, and we're getting your food. We're getting the food. You're not going to deny us. And this is the scariest thing. You're going to get that. They're not going to walk away and go hungry and let their kids starve if you're the only house that has food. It's going to be a year process, just like they did. Who was that? I was talking to Clive DeCarl over in the UK, and he was talking about peak oil in Cuba. Now, right after Russia at that point, the USSR stopped supplying Cuba with oil, they had about a 12-week lead time. So what they did is they started ripping up the streets and going into full organic production, the best they knew how at the time. And then the subsequent next year, it wasn't nearly as bad because people were composting, people were saving what was thrown away then. You know, when you see leaves fall off the tree this next year, you're going to be diving on the leaves. Go, those are mine. I need them for compost.
Right.
So it's going to be this 1 year of complete upset and ripping apart of the threads of society. But I do believe people will put it back together once they realize how to make their own fertilizers. And please check out this one. It's called JDAM, JADAM. There's a huge amount of research in Korea on how to make fertilizers out of anything around your forest or around your farm, around your house.
Oh, that's good. We definitely
need
that
it's the
one.
Best book I've read on it, and it's how to step by step by step. They also have an herbicide JDAM and then also a pesticide JDAM course. So you can do everything pretty naturally there.
Right.
But I do believe the fertilizers, everybody will come over that at the end of the year once they realize what happened. And seeds, people are going to start growing seeds like we did, start saving seeds. And my research has taken me into the victory gardens of the 1940s with World War II. And we grew 40% of all the food in America in people's backyards during the wartime effort.
Yep.
And then so quickly how after the war was over, the government had pushed to everybody go back to the supermarkets. Look how full there are. There's no more ration cards. Please go back to the supermarkets, support America's economy again, go buy the butter from the store. Don't grow any vegetables at your house. We need the farmers to make money to make America strong again. So just don't, and it literally stopped within like 6 months. The very following year, it went from 40% production down to 10%. That was a super vast, incredible drop. Yeah. Because the war had ended. Yeah. And right after the victory gardens ceased, it was the following year, 1947. The amount of production from 1945 to the amount of 1947 on victory gardens, everybody was shopping in the supermarkets again.
And then where
we sit today, everybody forgot. Super short memory, incredible short memory. We could have kept that system going, you know, for the last 70 years from the end of that. And we could have definitely increased that from 40 to 60 to nearly 100%. But then it come back, there's no corporate control. And I want to say one last thing, Lynette, and then I want to really see what you think about the economy moving in tandem through the end of the year here. And I know you're not specific on the months or the dates or something, but I'm very specific saying October, the world's going to shred itself here when people are really scared about the food and there's going to be fighting and they'll have to put troops around in the stores. And it's just going to get really unwound here at the end of the year. But I don't know. I was going to say something and I forgot, but please continue. It'll probably come back to me.
That's okay. We get really passionate, but you know, yes, if it seems to me, and I can see things that are really heating up, and we're being driven from crisis to crisis to crisis, which keeps us off balance and really not knowing what to do. But you know, when you look at all of the data, I agree with you 100%. And in fact, in June, we're doing the George Gammon event in Miami, and we're getting to go to Vizcaya and the Victory Garden, which fed, I think, 40% of the population in Miami during the Great Depression, and then also probably in the war. And they have it closed now, but we're going to have a special tour there. And that's much of the reason why I actually grew outside my backyard was for people that are hungry and hopeless. Hopefully they won't destroy the plants. Hopefully they'll be smart enough to recognize that this is food and they can come back every day and find something that is, you know, blooming and ready to eat, because that's what I've been doing. But there's a huge parallel. And even, you know, let me take this one step further with the food. The way that they went into mass production of the food with all the chemicals and really just depleting the nutrition of the soil, because it really is all about the soil. You've got to have rich soil and good water, but it really is about dumbing down America, because if you're not eating really clean, nutritionally dense food, you can't think as clearly. And if you can't think as clearly, well, then you go along with things a whole lot easier. I mean, it is much easier not to pay attention. But ignorance of any of this doesn't make you immune. It just leaves you vulnerable. And yes, I see a tremendous amount of parallels through the end of this year. For me, 2022 is always economically a very pivotal year because presumably in 2023, they have to shift basically almost every financial contract out there from one interest rate benchmark to a different interest rate benchmark. And I don't think they can do it. And when they tested it, it was a big fat fail. So, I know I have sped up things that I was planning on doing, next year and getting it done this year. I did the same thing last year, things that I were planning on doing this year, because I can see a collapse. I can see it really close.
Well, let me ask you on the switch over on the rates there. They're still trying to switch the rates from one system while there's still two working systems together. They're trying to initiate a new system while there's still an old system chugging along here.
Maybe.
But what if they were to collapse the old system completely and then just restart under the new system?
That's what I'm saying. Yes, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said maybe. Because we always make the assumption that they want this to go on. But when you're at the very end and you know it, do you really want it to keep going on? No, it can't. It can't. And the debt bubble has already been pricked, and they have to raise rates to maintain their credibility, which helps them maintain control. And they're losing that credibility pretty rapidly. So, this other system, it's not working yet. The LIBOR and the way the SOFR responds to it is very different. So the whole system is built on the LIBOR, but they want to switch it to the SOFR. And the reason why they were not getting the markets to cooperate, because they've been trying to make this transition for a while, is because these two rates don't behave the same way, and it reprices every single contract out there that's issued against the LIBOR and has to shift into the SOFR, and that'll collapse the system. They say that they're not ready with the new system yet, in other words, the CBDCs. But I don't know if that's true or not, because why would the Fed issue FedNow accounts to everybody in the US so prematurely? It just doesn't make sense if they weren't ready to push a button and insert those CBDCs, programmable money.
Well, if they came out clean and said, we have it, we're ready for it, people are going to say, well, we want some oversight to see how this thing operates. Yep. Instead of just coming out of the blue, like, bam, it's ready. Oh, there's a collapse right now. Oh, it's already ready. Oh, that's perfect timing. It was just coincidental. It's already ready. Wow, we can save you. You won't starve if you get the CBDC.
Right.
Oh, by the way, your digital rationing card's on the same app with that you can hold your vaccine passport on the digital facial recognition. So happy Tuesday. Everything's syncing up. And wow, isn't it a beautiful world? We just saved you. Again, centralization worked, didn't it?
Yeah, no.
Please rely on us again.
Yeah, please rely on us again. Please just do what we say and not what we do, right? I mean, you look at what's happening with the spot gold market and the spot silver market. That's the only asset that hasn't been inflated. But hey, they raised those interest rates on those bonds. Now you have something that pays you interest. Of course, the currency is worthless against gold that doesn't pay you interest, but it's used across every sector of the global economy. Okay, what's that worth?
Quite a bit more. Hopefully 1 or 2 ounces of silver to pay off my farm and during the hyperinflation event. Or I'd be even happy if a kilo of silver paid off my farm during the hyperinflation event. And then I could acquire a couple other pieces of land that got foreclosed on and then allow the people to still live there. So that's the whole thing. Because I was reading some things about in the Great Depression, and they had what they called the penny auctions going on, where the banks would confiscate the homes, then they would try to re-auction them, and then the local people would show up, and then they would buy their farms back cheaper. But at the same time, if somebody really couldn't afford it, people would buy their land and just let them stay there and still work on the farm and then have the community still growing food for each other. And I really like that concept, because if I had the means to do it and stop a family from getting evicted off their farmland, I would absolutely buy it and say, you're 100%. Welcome to stay here and live here. Just, security. And keep the food coming and, help other people along, because we're all going to need that. You can't be kicking people off their farmlands during this time. I mean, that is going to be a great disruption if people are removed off their farms at the small scale.
Right.
But agribiz will be in there. I'm sorry, Lynette, like agribiz can't come in here and start taking these 20 acres and the 12 acres down the road and the 16 acres over here. I mean, they would have to connect them all the way through, and then they would still only get 100 acres, and they're not going to run big machines out here for a couple hundred acres. They want the 10,000 acre plots.
But there's been this trend over the last number of years where like, look, it's been the corporatization and the financialization of every single asset, unfortunately, including farmland. And they've really been pushing the small farmers out because guess what? Small farmers have to actually like make a profit to be able to stay in business. And they've really been pushing, I've seen that a lot here in Arizona, where they've been pushing the small farmers out and corporations have been taking over the farms. So what's your feeling on that, and what have you seen?
Well, I suggest everybody to watch, if you have an extra hour and 10 minutes, a documentary called King Corn.
Yes.
This just lays it out. I don't know if have you seen that, Lynette, that documentary?
I haven't seen the documentary, but I did see that you just talked about that recently. So I intended to watch it, but I haven't yet. Well,
it goes into the whole subsidy program on what the government matches. And then if you don't get any government subsidies from your farm, you lose money on every acre.
Exactly.
It's literally impossible to make money at the going rates at what you would be paid without getting government help. And then again, it's another mechanism of control, because when the USDA, you can't grow this, you have to certify that. And there's a complete, pipeline of control of where your food goes, what your cows do, where the milk, you are 100% controlled at that point by them. And you have no other option. But some of the bigger farmers are super happy because they're getting, hundreds of thousands of dollars in stipends and different things. And they just run their big tractors. And one thing about that was, they were saying this is 10 years ago, this documentary. So, and they're like, we like to buy out the small farmers because they make it difficult. We have to turn our tractors more. If we can buy their farm and we just bulldoze their house, then we don't have to turn our tractors around as much. We can plant and seed and do maintenance on the fields much faster if we don't have to turn our machines around their homes so much. And I was like, you got to be kidding me.
That's amazing.
I was like, you got to be. I sat there, I just put it on pause and go, no, sheesh, you got to be kidding me.
Well, that brings up something else. Something that you said just triggered this thought in me, and that's the blockchain. Because if there's this whole chain of custody, isn't there that whole chain of control? And I can see the good in knowing that where you got the lettuce that had salmonella. That is certainly an important thing to know where that came from. But can you see how the blockchain can have an impact on the food production in, maybe not such a great way?
It could, especially if it's based on your digital rationing card that limits the amount that you can purchase. And also, they're going to be using maybe digital ledger, like a DLT settlement for your digital rationing card, because 1 = 1 swipe at the end of the day and then null that out. So the next time you go in, even a minute later, it'll be real time almost. Because I think
right.
DLT I think they're at 5 seconds on the clearing now to settle everything. So within 5 seconds, unless you step back in line, and within 5 seconds, rebuy something again. And so I've seen a lot of different ideas on what they're going to go with digital rationing cards, but it definitely is 100% going to be on the blockchain. It's going to be blockchain based. So again, they can trace back your purchases, your point of purchase, how much you purchased, and it'll be a complete record of everything you have purchased. And if you're trying to get a family member to go in instead of you, and with the facial recognition thing, I mean, before you could have your kid run down there and, take the card with you. In the 1940s, in the 1940s, they used to, have the children go run and do everything, right? But now, you can't do that anymore. You yourself have to be there and scan your thing and then blockchain and then QR code it, and before you can get it. So there's going to be a lot of hoops and hurdles to get through this time to get the food allocated to you or your family. What if you're sick and you literally can't go? You can't get somebody else to buy the food for you because it's not your face to unlock the phone for your personal, like you were talking, personal individual accounts from the Fed. Fed now. I can't share your account. My parents can't share my account. it's your account only. So when you go into the store for, your purchases, you physically need to be there. And unless they're going to be able to do it where you can order online somehow and still scan the QR codes and whatnot, but they always give you the worst of stuff if you're going to order online. So, and let me tell you a little story here. The Amish have been harassed by the USDA over here.
Mm-hmm.
They used to, they still do. They sold eggs, but the USDA inspectors came in and told them, "You're not registered. You didn't do this. You don't wash your eggs. You're not allowed to sell them. You're not allowed to advertise them or anything." So they're under the counter and you go, "Hey, you got any eggs? You got any eggs I could buy?" And they're like, "Yeah, let me get those." It's almost like they're drug dealers now. And it's crazy.
It's crazy.
The Amish have far better quality than anything you could get in a supermarket.
100%.
Yeah. And I could not believe that they're being harassed by the USDA. And it comes down to the vegetables too, but it was all about the sheep, the goat, and the eggs. And they're grass fed. I mean, they love those animals. They treat them so well. And they're, there's no chemical around there. And the guy in town who has a restaurant, I was telling him, we got the most amazing lamb from the Amish. They slaughtered it. We butchered it. And he was asking about, taste and stuff. I was like, we can bring you a couple loins or something if you want to try them. He's like, "Oh, not in the restaurant. Can't bring in anything in the restaurant that's not from the USDA with the blue ink or the blueberry ink on it." So even in the local town, 4 miles away from the Amish farm or 3 miles away, they can't even go there and purchase an animal that was grass fed on the Amish farm to go then serve in their restaurant, because anything in the restaurant sphere has to specifically come through that chain of custody. And it's just bizarre how it all works, that you can get better foods, but you're not allowed to serve them because they weren't inspected first through a, what do you call it, expert or something. I don't know.
It's pretty, it really is about that. It really is about the financialization of the whole world and the quality that you get once the corporations are in charge. And it doesn't matter. It could be medical care, dental care, food, water, everything, real estate. Everything has been turned by these corporations into financial products and then leveraged like crazy. So debt upon debt upon debt upon debt, which now that whole piece it's a house of cards that's ready to come down. And I wonder, what do you think all of this is really leading up to?
Well, you triggered that thought that I forgot early in their conversation. I said, I forgot what I was going to say.
Good.
The COVID wiped out all small businesses. So there's no other opportunity for you to buy anything. So everything's being really under corporate control now. There's very little that's not under corporate control. And for these grand plans of the World Economic Forum and all the, banking institutions across the world, for it to work, all corporations have to be involved and march lockstep for the desired goal at the end. So if you had 50 other places to shop and your supermarket ran out of food, whoop-de-doo, I'm going to go to the Asian market. I'm going to go to the Indian market. I'm going to go to the Amish. I'm going to go down wherever. The mom and pop ABC store on the corner. Yeah. Those have all been pretty much wiped out. Now, COVID did one thing. It reduced small business down to a mere trickle. And any of those that survived are at the very bottom of the food chain of deliveries. They go without all the time. And Walmart, I got a little information on Walmart. Somebody who was a buyer that got fired from their job, they closed one of the Walmarts. And it's just weird that my friend knew her and knew I was into that kind of supply chain stuff. So before they closed down that Walmart, she told him that after 6 months, there's going to be nothing left. That's why they're closing the stores now. The Walmarts are closing. So, there's a whole bunch of things. Well, they're going to close it and dig underground or something. I don't know what that's all about. But the thing is, the Walmarts are being closed because after 6 months, there's really nothing else in the chain after that. And me living in China and working there, I understand the names of the ports and like what's going on in these specific regions with the lockdowns in Shanghai. I follow a lot of Telegram groups that have that smuggled videos that get out of there and locking people in their homes, etc. But the whole thing now with Beijing locking down, they're going to be locking down Tianjin port, which is the next largest. If you start up at the top, right up near the Korean border, then you come into Qingdao, and then you get a little further south and you come into Tianjin, and then you come down to the big ones like Shanghai, Ningbo. And then if you go up the estuary, up the tributaries up there, you can come up into Hangzhou and Suzhou. Like those are all closed, all of them. They got 13,000 ships waiting offshore there. And then if you go down to the Pearl River Delta down there in Guangzhou, down near Hong Kong, Hong Kong's been a mess for years off the protests and now installing a new government before there were years, decades in advance
Right.
of installing the puppets. But everywhere you look, like that whole Pearl River Delta in Guangzhou and that whole area has been just at a trickle since COVID began anyway. It never returned to its volume of containers. And, everywhere you look, shut down, shut down, shut down, shut down. It is a wall of no goods are coming now. Just please understand that too.
Right.
Things for repair parts aren't coming anymore. So whatever's in there, and then that was validated by somebody from that secondhand story from a Walmart buyer, was nothing's coming after 6 months. That's October. It all matches up. I can't believe succinctly. It's just that the next layer of cake keeps coming on with the same slice mark on it. It's crazy.
That is really crazy.
It's interesting.
Well, let me ask you, since you lived in China for so long, with all of these lockdowns, what do you think the real point is? I mean, do you really think it's about getting rid of COVID, or do you think it's about something else?
It's definitely not about COVID. I will go on the record and say that. There's a couple options to look at there. Political, you could say that. I won't go too deep into it. But at the very least, to cut off all the maintenance repair operations and all the repair parts for all of our machinery in the States. So if anything breaks, we can't use it. Like there's stories of $1 million combines sitting out in the field because they can't get a new rim off and the tire itself because it came from China. And all that type of repair part that was existing in the US has been used up. So now they're starting to cannibalize machines and machinery. Mm-hmm. And you got $1 million. That's just startling that you got $1 million combine sitting in the field that they can't get repaired. And, if you do stop the trickle of goods down to literally zero, then if you can't repair it, then what?
Exactly.
Literally, then what?
Do you have an answer for
tanks
that?
And artillery and all type of, how much stuff was manufactured over there for our military? It's startling that we would put in the Chinese hands our repair parts for our own military. It's startling that happened. And that was just for me, that was the last straw. I'm like, this is definitely happening on purpose. Once I realized that the shutdowns and the non-shipping deliveries from China also included military vehicle and some armament repair parts and also some higher tech things from some of our fighters in China manufactured. Are you insane?
Wow.
That's what's happened. And once all this hits to the head where the low harvest come in October, everybody's going to realize, but then we're not going to have anything to really repair the cars, the automobiles, whatever it might be, factory parts, conveyor belts, anything. And then what? Then we're going to be a broken down country with nothing going, hardly anything moving. Shoot, I talked to some guys up at the railroad, some grain buyers out in California that are in the dairy industry, told me that they are so limited on crews and teams on the railroads right now, heaven forbid trying to get anything repaired, that the crews are the people who drive the trains, but the teams are the ones who assemble the trains, make sure the right cargo's on at destination point, load it up, make sure all the cars are connected, do all the safety checks and all this stuff. They don't even have enough staff to run at base level right now. And that's why you see BNSF also cutting fertilizer shipments and a huge amount of other things that are not going to be delivered by rail or extremely curtailed. So it all starts to fit in. It's corporate control again. Everywhere you look, it's a corporate breakdown. It's a corporate supply chain. It's happening on purpose. And I sound like a broken record now.
Well, you know what? You need to sound like a broken record because this has been evolving for a really long time. And so if the corporations are controlling everything and you want something and you get desperate enough, then I guess you go along with anything they tell you to do, don't you?
You do. And that's, again, a digital rationing card. There's so many things people are going to have to do to get that. They're going to probably require double vaccination to get your digital rationing card. They've been pushing the vax thing for so long, and then it kind of fell off. And, the max thing, but then again, it's starting to bubble back to the surface again. And when it really comes push to shove and the cold and flu season comes back again, you want your food, you need to get vaxxed. And that's the scariest thing, too, is how they're going to push that. And Lynette, I really didn't answer your question about China, but I think depopulation of political enemies and a war with the United States to weaken us so far that there'd almost be no resistance by the time we got here. We'd be emaciated with no food, and we'd have no repair parts, and all of our machinery and different things couldn't even put up a fight because it wouldn't run.
Wow.
That's where I think we're going with it. You know, it's a long played out thing. The Chinese, they game everything out for 100 years. This whole 4-year thing, and they're just laughing right now. How it's it's probably perfect synchronicity. They've been planning this since the 1950s. They still got 30 years to go on the 100-year plan from the 50s. Come on.
And you see these days, you see all of these headlines about doing away with the dollar as the world reserve currency. I mean, in my entire career, I haven't seen this so often. So do you think this is a transfer of power?
I don't know. That's your wheelhouse, understanding the dollar and the ditching of the dollar for a slang term there. So what do you think? Do you really like, and percentage wise, how many countries have gotten off the dollar at 100%? They don't use it at all. And how many are sort of, in that, switching mode between getting some Chinese yuan as a settlement instrument and then also keeping some dollars for other things. And there's sort of this, mix and match going on where before it was 100% dollar, or you were invaded and your government was overthrown and we put our puppets in there to make sure you use the dollar. But now that doesn't seem to be the way it is anymore.
No, but that's been transitioning. Really, that started transitioning back in 99. So this is, and again, it happens slowly so that you don't notice it, but we're at the end here, and most countries still do hold a level of dollars, but that has been declining over time. And I think that and with all of the rhetoric now about the U.S., living without the dollar, or the systems that can go around the SWIFT, which is the U.S. system, et cetera, really what's happening in so many ways is that we're using that advantage of the world reserve currency. And that means that I think the hyperinflation is going to be worse here almost than any other place because we have a lot more to lose. We have a lot further to fall.
When you say hyperinflation, what price would you be talking about for a pack of seeds? Okay, right now you can get anything from 99 cents for a pack of seeds with, a small little countryside brand here, or mainly a regional brand, or you can get all the way to super heirloom. It's $4.99 a pack. Okay, so we'll say $1 to $5 on a pack of seeds. So this hyperinflation event, what are you talking about for a pack of seeds in the future after this all unfolds? Are you talking about $10, $100?
No. I would think, probably like $100 and more because of the loss of value. I mean, look, we don't have very much value in there, and the only thing of the dollar now, and the only thing that's kind of holding it together is that people can't imagine that the dollar could go away, even as it's going away. But since that's happening, so, if you look at the trend line of the loss of purchasing power officially on the Fed, what you see is a massive drop off. So a pattern shift change that I do think that we are already in the beginning stages of the hyperinflation. Even though I don't have, we haven't hit 50% yet, but, I love how all of those guys in power that say, yeah, it's going to be bad, but then it's going to peak and it's going to come down next year. And look at all the headlines and how many times they've been surprised by the level of inflation, or they've been surprised by this, you've been surprised by. So these are the guys that you're going to listen to tell you? No. So yeah, I mean, I think we're this close. We're probably about that close. But I think that the hyperinflation has begun, and what's it going to be to buy a pack of seeds? Hundreds, maybe thousands.
Yeah, then what would it be? Something that's substantial if you went in for a bag of groceries. You're talking about $100,000 for a bag of groceries, or $250,000 for a bag of groceries.
And the price is doubling every day, every 5 hours, this is what happens in hyperinflation. So whatever little bit that you make, they've been touting all of these increases in labor's really got it good now because it's so tight, as you just talked about, except that all of these raises still haven't kept pace with the increase in cost of living. Food, shelter. It really is food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. We need to make sure that we have security in every single one of those areas in order to sustain a standard of living. And, I'm going to assume that you're right, because I just think you're beyond brilliant anyway. And if you think that it's going to last, Well, I didn't do it. I just recognize it. But if you think I have been preparing everything for at least 10 years. Though the gardens, the hot houses, the energy, the solar and all of that'll last hopefully, forever, so that long after I'm gone, my family can still, and my family, I use that term really broadly. Yes, it's my immediate family, but it's also the community family.
Yeah, some things you're gonna have to protect that too. So please get into the mind frame of others are gonna want what you have when they can't afford it and their families are hungry. And they've never experienced anything like this before. Like what we're going into, nobody in America has experienced really before. Even the poorest in America are going to be shocked by where it's going.